and I am currently involved in two different projects. One looks at decarbonization in Sweden, where we look at how the Swedish state, interacts with non-state actors such as businesses, civil society organizations, research organizations, etc. And the second project I'm involved in looks at a country's long-term decarbonization strategies and how they are planning for reducing emissions and achieving net zero targets. So that's got more of a global focus. But I'm here today to talk about the IPCC's latest report, Mitigating Climate Change. And it came out in April this year. The third report in the sixth assessment review. The first report that came out in 2021 looked at the physical science basis, so looking at the natural science and what do we know about human-induced climate change. And basically they concluded that there are no doubts that humans are causing global warming. The second report came out earlier this year, and it looked at impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability. So basically, what can we say about global warming's impacts on our societies? And they found that humans have caused global warming to the effect that some changes that have occurred are irreversible, so we can't change them back. But this report, the third one, looks at mitigating climate change. So what are some of the solutions that we have to address global warming? So what I will do in this presentation is to first give you a little bit of a background to the report, and then bring out some of the key messages in the report. And please excuse me if my voice goes, I've got a bit of a cold. But if I talk too fast or if there's some thing that's unclear, please raise your hand or just ask a question during the presentation. So the first thing to note is that there's years of work by researchers to produce such a report as the IPCC's third work group report. It involves many authors across different countries, and much of the work they had to do this time online because of the pandemic. So it's a huge undertaking. They've reviewed more than 18,000 scientific papers. They've addressed almost 60,000 review comments by both other researchers, but also policymakers. So it's a very solid report. And the report contains both a summary for policymakers, a technical summary, and the full report. And if anyone's ever read an IPCC report, you will know what this picture is meant to symbolize. So the full report has lots of rich details. It's very powerful, whereas the summary for policymakers is much shorter. So the full report was 2,913 pages this time. The summary for policymakers is only 64 pages. And the difference is that with the summary for policymakers go through every line of summary to make sure that they agree with it. So it's a compromise summary that has been reviewed by policymakers so that everyone's on the same page. And the summary is very tame. It contains a lot of diplomatic language. So if you're a non-expert, you can easily get lost in the summary for policymakers. So if you're intending to read the report, I would rather advise you to go to the technical summary. The technical summary is a bit over 100 pages, but here it's the researchers' summaries from the different chapters put together in one place. So that's my recommendation. And we've seen IPCC's headline summaries before, and they have very stark messages. But looking at how world leaders are acting at the moment, you would think that the messages have not really come across yet, because they're not acting very consistently with what the report says. And in fact, it would be wise of them to read the report, because it offers them a menu of options of how to deal with several challenges that the world is facing with today. So the first thing that the report notes is that we are not on track to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Sorry, Naghmeh.
Yeah.
Sometimes your sound is a little bit off. Is it possible that...
Should I hold it like this? Is this better?
Possibly. We can try like that. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Hope it works. So the report notes that there's both a gap in ambition and in the implementation of climate action at the world level. So the way things are going now, it's not going to help us meet the 1.5 degree target in the Paris Agreement. And they also note that without immediate and deep emissions reductions across all sectors, limiting global warming to 1.5 degree is beyond reach. So basically, they're saying that incremental change is not enough. We need something better. So these messages that you will see on this slide, they are direct quotes from the report. So here they say that shifting development pathways to sustainability implies making transformative changes that disrupt existing developmental trends.
Sorry, the sound is still really bad. Maybe it's a glap.
Let me try without. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Okay, so
Yes, we can hear you better now.
Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Let me just find the screen again. Are you seeing my PowerPoint or?
No, we lost that now.
Okay, let's see here again. And
yes, now we're good.
Great, sorry about that. Good, okay, so we can't make marginal changes. We need big technological, systemic, and socio-behavioral changes. And they also say that shifts in development pathways result from both sustained political interventions and bottom-up changes in public opinion. Collective action by individuals as part of social movements or lifestyle changes underpins system change. So the message here is that we need structural changes, and we all have a role to play. But they also point out that some people have a bigger role to play than other people, and they go into equity aspects, such that the richest 10% account for almost half of emissions in the world, and so they have a bigger impact in reducing emissions. They also talk about the need to reduce fossil fuels. We need to shift investments away from fossil fuels and towards low carbon technologies. That the continued installation of unabated fossil fuel infrastructure will lock in greenhouse gas emissions and also create stranded assets. So if you keep investing in fossil fuels and you intend to meet your climate targets, then these investments will be stranded assets. They also highlight the industrial sector, that it is quite challenging to reduce emissions from many industries, but it is possible, that there are solutions, and that these will entail coordinated action throughout the value chains to promote all mitigation options, including demand management, energy and materials efficiency, circular material flows, as well as abatement technologies and transformational changes in production processes. So industries can no longer say that, well, we don't have any options, because there are options and they need to be implemented. However, the report also points out that the deployment of carbon dioxide removal, CDR, will be needed to counterbalance hard-to-abate residual emissions to achieve the temperature targets. Oh, sorry. So carbon dioxide removal come in different forms, and they have different maturity levels and different feasibility levels. So it could be natural solutions like afforestation and reforestation, or it could be, for example, more speculative technologies that are at the development stage, such as direct air carbon and capture and storage. So the idea is that we need to suck carbon out of the air to compensate for those emissions that are very difficult to reduce. And they point out, for example, the agricultural sector as one where it will be difficult to reach zero emissions, and therefore we need these other CDR options. And I came across an interesting quote by a researcher on Twitter, who says that CDR is like a weight loss pill. They are useless without diet and exercise, and no one fully understands their side effects. And the IPCC report is also clear that we cannot bank on CDR solutions without also deeply reducing the current emissions that we have. And for the first time in an IPCC report, there's a focus on demand side mitigation. So much research has been on how do we address supply of fossil fuels, for example. But here they also talk about demand side mitigation, which requires social, cultural, and behavioral change. And they talk a lot about the need for active mobility and other behavioral changes, changes in food systems, and how we, what we put on our plates. And they conclude that demand side mitigation response options are consistent with improving basic well-being for all. So a lot of the emission reductions that they see as possible come from these types of interventions. They also stress the need to address several challenges at once, and they say that accelerated and equitable climate action in mitigating and adapting to climate change impacts is critical to sustainable development. It is possible that climate change actions result in some trade-offs, but that these could be addressed through policy design. And so it's important to basically look at these different goals and try to address them in tandem. They also stress that more climate action will have distributional consequences, both within countries and between countries, and that equity is very important to address, that there's a need for meaningful participation of all relevant actors in decision making to build trust and to widen support for transformative changes. So basically, they're saying that attention to equity can accelerate climate action, and that there is a need for more voices to be heard in decision making. And they also highlight the youth movement as an example of movements that are pushing for more progressive climate action. But the ray of hope is that since the previous assessment report, the fifth assessment report, they are noting that there has been more climate action around the world. They say that some countries have achieved a steady decrease in emissions consistent with limiting warming to 2 degrees, and that these zero emissions targets have been adopted in many cities and regions, but also countries around the world. They also point out that the costs of mitigating climate change are falling, particularly because of reductions in the price of solar PV, wind power, batteries, etc. So they're highlighting the potential to speed up climate action. They also say that achieving the global transition to a low carbon, climate resilient, and sustainable world requires purposeful and increasingly coordinated planning and decisions at many scales of governance, including local, subnational, national, and global levels. And this is what makes it exciting for a political scientist, because they say that we need good governance, that political system is key to delivering changes, but that these changes need to be directed, they need to have a purpose, and they need to be coordinated. And so one of the biggest challenges is the governance challenge, how to get actors to cooperate with one another and move more or less in the same direction at the required speed. They highlight many different challenges, the building sector, transport sector, how we use land, and the fact that more and more emissions are coming from urban areas because more people are moving into cities, and that therefore the local governments have a very important role to play in addressing climate change. Right. So just to sum up this very brief overview of the latest report, the world is facing multiple crises, but the report makes clear that we do not have time to address each crisis one by one. We do not have time for solutions that make other problems worse, but we need to think more holistically and to find more synergistic solutions that involve marginalized peoples to leave no one behind while meeting planetary boundaries. And so I think from the reports in the media, what has been sort of not highlighted so much, but if you dig deeper into the report, it says that business as usual is not an option. We need big changes and we need fast changes, and we need to get everyone aboard. So anyone who says that solving climate change is an easy problem, don't listen to them, because if you read the report, you can really see the magnitude of the challenge. But you also see that there are many solutions if we choose to implement them. So from a researcher's perspective, the report is like a piece of art. It brings together so many strands of research. And even if the summary for policymakers is quite difficult to read, if you dig deeper into the parts, the chapters that you're mostly interested in, I think you will find a lot of valuable information. So with that, thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very, very much, Naghmeh. That was great. While waiting for hands to rise, I just have a quick reflection. First of all, I want to know the word unbaited. I'm sorry, I don't know that one.
Yes. So fossil fuel industry is trying to come up with solutions to capture the carbon emissions or methane emissions and basically put them underground. So this is their solution to continue producing fossil fuels. And so the report says, unless you have those solutions in place, you can't have any new fossil fuel facilities being invested in.
Thank you. Yes, hands will come up, and when they don't, I'm going to fill in with my questions. Please, Kjell Prytz.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much. I think my interpretation of this report is that we need to shift focus from emissions to uptake. So from emissions to uptake of carbon. And I think the message is that we need to uptake, that is sequestration of carbon corresponding to the excess of carbon dioxide that we have today in the atmosphere until year 2100. So how should we do that? I mean, you talk about CDR, but that is you mentioned that just because we want to balance our emissions with CDR to reach net zero. But in my understanding, what IPCC tells us is that CDR should be used to reduce the content of carbon in the atmosphere.
No, the IPCC says we need CDR to reduce emissions from the sectors that are very difficult to get to zero emissions. So they're not saying that we should use CDR to meet the climate targets as a main choice, but to have it as a choice just to get to zero for those sectors that are very difficult to get to zero.
But the climate target is not net zero. The climate target is to reduce the content of carbon in the atmosphere to reach the level of pre-industrial conditions.
The way I read it is that the 1.5 degree target requires halving emissions 2030 from 2019 levels, and then getting to net zero by 2050 globally.
No, but the target, the IPCC target is for the year 2100. And in the year 2100, we should have removed all the excess of carbon dioxide that we have today. So this is our challenge. And that means that we have to redirect our focus from emission to uptake of carbon.
No, that's not how I've read the report. The report says we need to reduce emissions actively and drastically. And on top of that, we need CDR to compensate for those emissions we cannot reduce. And then probably, because we will fail to do this, we will need more CDR to draw down.
Net zero is not the target. The target is negative emissions.
Yeah, that's
after
2050. Yeah, that's after 2050. But
and that is important to plan for already now.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I agree with that. And what my research team and others have said is that we need many of the CDR options require quite long lead times. They do not emerge by themselves. They need policy support. And so there also needs to be a focus on that. But the main focus is still to reduce the emissions that we have today and to avoid new emissions.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, since we're not even trying today, I think there would be quite a few saying that we need to continue because we are so important for this and that. Me.
So your background is in political science. What is your best thinking on how we get political action and civil action to speed up? Because speed's what we need. What's your best thinking?
So as political scientists, we try to make clear to policymakers that technological innovation is not enough by itself. It's important, but it's not going to get us there in time. We also need socio-political innovation. So we need to rethink how we arrive at decisions, how we involve more people, and how to get more honest discussions about the challenges ahead. And there, I mean, like what you people do in civil society, I think there we need to question more. We need to question the decisions being made today. We need to question the discourses. We need to question, the way we're heading. And for that, we need international cooperation as well. So I don't think there's a silver bullet. It's more continuing protesting, continuing questioning, and trying to get change, even if it's small changes. Those can lead to bigger changes at the local level, community levels, and just talk about the issues as much as possible.
Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe just with the examples we've seen in other countries of citizens' assemblies, that hasn't been tried at the national level in Sweden. And I know that one political party was trying to get it, but others thought our democracy works well already, so we don't need it. I think that kind of experiments with democracy would also be useful.
Thank you. Me, you're happy? So Ola, please.
Thank you. Thanks for the talk. What I worry about is the contrast between what you're saying and what our climate minister is saying. She claims that it's impossible to reduce that much or that fast that we need to, but still think we should hang on to the 1.5 degree target. Does she ever talk to you or your institution? Have you ever seen her around? So
No.
where does she get her information from? That's my question.
I assume she's got many advisors. I don't know who they are. But I mean, she's got a political role and she bases it, I guess, on what the party thinks. So I mentioned before that engaging in civil society is important, but also engaging in political parties is important because that's where you can get the biggest changes, I think.
Yeah. So do you have any plans for sort of penetrating into the government and really indoctrinate them?
No, I try to make statements through the media. I mean, there's a discussion about the role of researchers versus politics, and I think those lines are getting more and more blurred, because if you sit on the sidelines, then you don't really have a big role to play anyways. But I think each researcher has to think for themselves what they're most comfortable doing and where they think they can get the biggest effects. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Sherwin, please.
Hello. I have a weak connection, so it's you can't see me. The video is off. Thanks a lot, Naghmeh. Really nice to have you here. I have two questions. As a psychologist, I wonder what kind of psychological research is needed for better political action in this field, and what do you need as political scientists? What kind of psychological research is missing? And I also wonder what kind what you think about the current war and the changes in the global power structure. is it benefiting you? Do you think is going to benefit the climate issues, or on the contrary? Thank you.
Thanks. Great questions. On the need for psychological research, I think a big field in political science is now about social acceptance and public opinion. And I think there's a big potential to work together to understand how people make judgments about what's feasible or what's desirable, because much of the research has been about sort of economic efficiency. We just need policies that make the transition economically beneficial, but there's usually a trade-off between economic efficiency and fairness perceptions, and so social accountability might be an issue. So there, I think there's a need for more research and understanding how people can get more engaged, basically. And on the question about the current war, I don't think any war would be beneficial to climate change, but we are seeing sort of some types of advances towards emphasizing renewable energy more for energy security. The EU, I think, is opening up for more renewable energy at the moment. But on the other hand, we also have the other trend of investing more in fossil fuels. And so that goes against the IPCC report, which warns about lock-in. So I think on the balance, it won't per se make big change for the better, but there is, of course, a potential for actors to push for more renewable energy at the moment.
Yes, thank you. Jennifer, please.
Hello, thank you for a brilliant presentation, and also everyone. There's been wonderful questions. It's been fantastic to join and follow. The kind of going back to a few questions from the beginning in terms of the kind of politicians, or like where we can really make and implement a difference. A case from the UK where we tried to hold politicians to account for a lack of action was the Paid to Pollute case, where we had 3 people take the UK government to court because since the Paris Agreement, the UK government had spent billions in subsidies to fossil fuel industries as opposed to reducing emissions. However, that court case, the only win that was kind of taken from that was getting the UK government on record to simply admit that that was the case, and the legislative process saw no grounds to be able to actually take it any further. So when we, whether it's researchers or like just, you know, any member of the public are trying to implement change or trying to, you know, put pressure on political, like the politicians, the leaders, when you get examples like that, like where, and, you know, we see the kind of brilliant work of like the ecocide, stop ecocide, but when you get it to a court and that's as far as it goes, like from a political science kind of perspective, where can we do the most damage to politicians to make them actually kind of respond if they seem protected by every other means?
Yeah, great question. It's very difficult. I think having a multi-pronged approach is what would do the biggest damage. So doing the civil disobedience, doing the court cases, doing asking for accountability at every opportunity. I think you need sort of the many different avenues, and you can also take hope in that some court cases have been very successful and have started to move things along. So I think from studying, for example, yeah, I got a question about the Stockholm 1972 conference. Has it done anything? And I said it has progressed massively. We didn't even have environmental ministries back then, and now we have done much to highlight the environment, the right to have a healthy environment. But of course, globally, we have failed in avoiding the crisis that conference was trying to avoid. So I think it's about seeing both sides of the coin, that we are making a lot of progress, and there are no magic solutions, but we have to keep trying the different avenues that we find that, yeah, try to drive change as much as possible.
Yes. You happy, Jennifer?
Yeah, can I follow up with one, going back to Shervin's brilliant question on the kind of psychological research? Of course, keep trying with all the different multi-pronged approaches. But when we see, you know, there's that kind of psychological aspect of it has an effect on each and every person, and in terms of that, you know, the motivation to keep going against what feels like a brick wall. And when you put so much effort into something like a court case or, you know, the civil disobedience, we've seen brilliant examples of people really like kind of, yeah, causing that, upset to whether it's the politics, the economics, and so yeah, from a kind of psychological point, when it keeps, like, if it's too, like, you know, we know that we have to act fast, and when the response to our actions is only slowly changing, what can we maybe do about that, whether that's from a psychological perspective or just, yeah, ramping it up?
Yeah, no, I think that's a key question, and I think Shervin would probably be better at answering that one. But just from a personal kind of reflection, when I started following these issues over a decade ago, I felt so alone. Like, I felt like an alien, you know, like climate change. But it gives me hope that we are so many more now, and that things are moving, even though not at the speed that we want them to move. So I think you just have to finding hope where you see hope, and like Toya organizing this so that you can all hear about the IPCC report. That also gives me hope. My students who at the start when I started teaching was like, why do we need to care about the environment? Are now like, yeah, this is the most important thing. So yeah, just try to keep hope up, because I think that's useful.
Yes, that can sometimes be hard. I think we have a problem with number 8 at the global goals, the eternal growth of economy. But Annelies, please.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you for this excellent presentation, very timely, while we are working for Stockholm Plus 50. I have 2 points, especially, oh, do you hear me?
Yes.
You hear me well? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want to reflect on the comment by Ola, which I think is very important. My background is with UN for many years, working in different countries. And the way we have been successful is exactly indoctrinating the ministers. And every new minister coming, it has been to start from scratch. And the progress has depended on getting the ministers on board, and also the private sector, but the ministers is main area. And I started to reflect, what can be done parallel as far as the climate? And I think now my question to researchers desk, I think you can play the role, because now research and scientists have gained respect very much through the work that Greta has been doing. It's unpolitical and it's clear and respectful. And I think this could be a very important role with the support from civil society and organizations to address the ministers in different countries, starting with Sweden, to show the way. So that, I think, is a key issue and an opportunity, and it's required. The other one is, let me see if I remember it. Yeah, that we, civil society and NGOs, would also have to unite intersectorally. The different organizations work very much on their issue, and we have to be intersectoral, embracing also organizations that perhaps are not the one that we like so much, but they are in other areas, and we have to work intersectoral and unite towards the same approach of getting civil society and governments on board and together. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those remarks. Very key again, the need for coalitions. I think that's one of the key things that comes out of the political science research. So if you want to achieve things, you need to get others to join you, to have big coalitions to press for change. On the need to inform ministers, I agree. We've seen, for example, in France, with Macron now being re-elected, he sort of has this climate focus as a must to keep the younger people happy. And so he invited the IPCC and IPBES to brief him on the latest science. And I think all governments should get briefed. I know in the UK, there was civil disobedience to get UK ministers in the parliament to be briefed on the latest science. And I know that the Stockholm Resilience Center has a program to bring the latest science to CEOs of large companies. So any sort of initiative that tries to bring the latest science to people is important. But I also know that some politicians are saying it's not enough, because we also need to bring this information to the public who vote for the ministers. And so trying to educate the ministers, but also the public is really important.
Dear Anna, we have been trying to get to the politicians for 3 years, but we are continuing to try, but the researchers of Researchers Desk are constantly trying to do that.
Okay.
I would like to invite Janine.
Hi, this is Janine O'Keefe. Thank you for saying that you're not sitting on the sideline. I really appreciate that. That really helps a lot, and that gives me hope. Including the work with Peter Kalamus in Los Angeles. I'm sure you've seen it. And even just this last week with Extinction Rebellion, we had 4 or 5 doctors in white coats, and that totally took the energy out of the police. They were like shafted, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And the police have always been excellent, don't get me wrong, but they lost any feeling that they had the right to change something, if that makes any sense. They lost their ability to say that we had anything which was wrong, because that was so high in the hierarchy. So we really appreciate any scientist and anybody like yourself willing to be on the street, because it makes a big difference. And we're wondering how we can actually encourage more people like yourself to take more action, to be more strong.
Yeah, good question, but very difficult again. So when I go on Sveriges Radio or something, they always ask me, are you part of civil society? Because then we can't have you on the radio. So it's something there about the public, or yeah, some parts of the public still not seeing researchers as credible if they join civil society organizations. So I think if you want to make yourself heard through media, then you probably have to be more careful. But if you're a researcher who's not taking that media role, then I would encourage those to definitely join, because as you say, it is important. It also, so for the researcher, it's credible to not join if they're in the media, but I think for you, it's credible for researchers to join to get the extra support. So yeah, there's a bit of a trade-off sometimes, but I think we've seen so many encouraging signs of researchers acting more and more. So yeah, keep pushing.
Yeah, we have actually now booked on the 20th and the 21st of August, something called a climate emergency camp in Gärdet, which is just outside of Stockholm. So that hopefully will be a broad coalition just before the Swedish election.
Oh, great. What is the agenda for that, or what will you do?
Well, all the groups are welcome as long as you've declared climate emergency, and as many scientists have declared as possible, I hope. Klimataktion, which is a more long-term NGO, has actually collected over 150 names, people with pictures showing the signs of climate emergency. And there's about 10 scientists there, I think. We maybe need more. And I'm sure Researchers Desk has declared, and many people could take that on. So that would be great. But also it's about all the NGOs being able to coalesce in this situation.
Great. Sounds like you're doing great work. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yes, you are also doing great work, Naghmeh. Thank you. The time is running up because Naghmeh needs to leave at 55. There is no hand yet, so I'm gonna hurry up and ask. I'm gonna hurry up and ask a question. First of all, with the IPCC, the easier one, the summary for policymakers, I have read it, and I guess I'm of medium intelligence, and it was a really hard read anyway. If you're not in this world and knows the language of academia or the language of climate change, it will be really hard to understand everything. And I'm dreaming of an IPCC report, a summary for policymaker that is not that hasn't cut corners and keeps the weight of the full report, but at one first opening page, just being really clear about this is where we're at. This is how bad the situation is. A little bit like Guterres' speech when they launched the Working Group 3. That was finally someone. I mean, he's always quite straightforward, but on this press conference, he was really using another language that touched hearts.
Yeah.
Now in Sweden, because of the election coming up, everybody's talking about greenwash, green recovery or green transformation.
Yeah.
But it is just greenwash, actually, and no one is. You know, the researchers also, I mean, you have a huge task. We're just giving you more and more shit every day to handle. but one would want the researchers to be at all those TV debates and really, follow up with the questions that no one asks when they say that, yes, we need to lower the prices on gas now because the situation is dire, but we will make 1.5 target anyway. And it's like, why did no one say how? Why is no one putting them against the wall? This is not a question. The question is, sorry, I'm talking a lot. Did you read The Tragedy of Climate Science, the article that questions the whole IPCC report in the future?
Was that the one where they were advocating for scientists not to participate in IPCC?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I just read the abstract, but not the whole paper.
Mm. And what is the general idea? Do you think there should be a moratorium on these reports? Oops.
I don't think so. I don't think it would serve any purpose. There are other scientists that say we need annual reports that are not as comprehensive, but that are easier to digest for the public or for policymakers, because the science is moving so fast and the changes happening are moving so fast. So I would probably align more with that approach. Although, of course, it's a question of resources to put together such reports. But I will put some links here in the chat because you said that it's very difficult to read the report. A lot of research organizations and others are doing a good job to try to basically make sense of the report and make sense of the politics of it. So if anyone's interested, these are some links that give sort of like a briefer look at the key messages and and also how other scientists are reacting to the key insights from the reports. But yeah, I think the IPCC reports do serve a function. If we didn't have them, we would probably invent them. But I do understand those scientists who say that it's too late to have another report. This one will probably come out by 2030. And yeah, there's a new special issue being written on sort of what scientists see as the main task of IPCC in the era of climate breakdown. So yeah, that's something to follow.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for talking clearly. That's so needed. We have a few minutes left of your time, but I guess you'd be happy if you can take off 2 minutes earlier.
Yeah, if I could rest my voice a bit, that would be great. Sorry.
Okay, so last call for a question is now. And if no one has a question, we will thank you very much, Naghmeh, for this. And please continue to do what you're doing and be as loud as you can. And thank you.
Toya, Boo have a question.
Oh, sorry, Boo.
Thanks. Thank you for an interesting discussion. I was just reading about a football coach who has been wondering where are all the coaches. And Janine talked or mentioned Peter Kalmus, and he mentioned on Twitter that there's a historian rebellion starting. Could it be an idea to try to start a coaches rebellion to demand that politicians and the public listen to you researchers? Because I believe that you like more to do your research than to be a public figure and protesting and so on. But maybe we can help you get a place in the media by asking for media to listen to you or interview. But we need leaders to ask for your information or ask for your help, and we need leaders that have reach. And coaches are leaders that exists globally. So maybe that would be an idea in Sweden.
You mean sports coaches, or sorry?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely, because they work with young people. They well, and there was some discussion about the football championships in Qatar, I think. And was that a good place to have a football championship? So they deal with these issues and questions, and so far I haven't seen any talk with coaches about climate.
Yeah.
So that's a voice that could be heard.
Definitely. No, I agree with that. I've heard of sort of local initiatives to try to bring climate information to teams locally, but yeah, bigger scales would be useful.
Yeah, and my point is not to give them information, but ask for their leadership.
Yeah.
Because we don't need more information. We need leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think last week we saw the first climate protest at a Formula One rally in Miami.
Yes.
With one of the drivers having a climate T-shirt on. So yeah, any leadership is useful leadership. I agree.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Naghmeh. We will let you out of this digital room, but for the rest of you, you can stay a little bit longer if you want to talk. And welcome back, Naghmeh, at any time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and keep up the good work. Nice to meet you. Bye-bye.